Welcome back. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. How is it over there?
It is, things are going well. A lot of changes happening here in our practice, but it's like if anything we could do to make the holidays a little bit more challenging, a little bit more a little busier, we're gonna figure it out how to do that. So, but
I didn't think about that, but you're right. We've picked the busiest time of the year to go through a major change, right? A
yeah,
major renovation and change.
yeah, but
Okay, well, it'll keep everybody actively engaged.
I think so. So we are going to talk about the holidays again today,
Mhm.
but before we get to that, there were a few updates that we
Yeah,
wanted
hit
to
it.
do because we've touched on a few big topics over the last several weeks, last
Mhm.
couple of months actually, and
Right,
so we wanted to kind of give a few updates. And one of them is about, we talked a couple of months ago about the book banning, and we
right.
voiced our concern the issues that
Mhm.
we have with book banning. And we even had I don't know if you saw it, but on our YouTube channel, we had someone comment about how, books aren't banned, that these books are all still available and everything. And really what we're talking about is book banning, especially in schools and in educational institutions, because those when we're talking about students having access to information,
Mhm.
um, and one of the examples that we gave, and you spoke about it, was the removal of over 380 books from the U.S. Naval Academy. And so, when we talk about book banning and people say, well, books aren't really banned, they're just, they're still available. We're talking about big institutions for students of higher education. We're not just talking about elementary school kids. We're talking about
And adults,
adults,
who will be commanding our Navy in a couple of years.
right?
These are not children.
Right. We're talking about those people having restricted access to books. And yes, sure, they could still go online and they can still buy the books, or they can still go to a bookstore and buy the books. But, we're when libraries are there for a reason. Sometimes we want to read books without having to purchase the book. And so, book banning is a real thing, and we are very opposed to it. But there's an update about this whole process, and especially as it relates to the U.S. Naval Academy.
Right. Yeah, we live in Florida, and Florida has the distinction of banning the most books of any state in the union.
Yeah.
Over almost 5,000 titles have been removed. Um, and so, but to remove them from the Naval Academy, seemed to me, I mean, these are adults, and they should anyway. So they remove all these books, and since then, one of the graduates of the Naval Academy, and he had been a Navy commander for 22 years, was shocked by this discovery, by this action by the Naval Academy. And so he launched a campaign to get the books back in the academy. He
Mhm.
started with a crowdfunding campaign, wanted to raise, I think, something like $6,000 or $7,000, managed to raise $70,000. And in one of his statements said that, he reminded everybody that the motto of the U.S. Naval Academy is from knowledge, sea power. And he said, if we mean without knowledge, education, and intellectual growth, we will never become a strong Navy. And so the contradiction struck him that instead of encouraging knowledge and discussion, the Pentagon was actually suppressing knowledge and limiting discussion. And since then, the books have been returned. What struck me about this was really an act of courage
Yeah.
by this man. And as things unfold in our country, and they're unfolding at a rapid rate in all areas, these small acts of courage may give us a glimmer of hope that we can turn some of these things around. But it's going to take courage by individuals. This man risked a lot, even though he's retired. He'd still risk his reputation and he risked punishment and public ridicule for making a very courageous decision.
Absolutely. And I think that we're seeing courage like that in a lot of areas, as you said. And it's great to see. And I think that I think that we do have to voice our concerns and our opposition and the problems that we may feel as it relates to some of these things. And I think it's a great model for the way that we should be speaking out about some of these concerns and issues, and hopefully that will continue. Because the other update that we want to share is another area where I think that we need to find a voice to talk about, and that is, on our on our Wednesday podcast, the podcast that it comes out on Wednesday. The last few weeks we've talked about men, and one of the big topics of that series has been about seeing men as providers and some of the problems that has led to. And one of the things that related to that is the significant issue that we've had with income inequality here in the United States. And
Right.
while we know that, capitalism drives innovation and capitalism, there's a lot of really positive and growth-minded things related to capitalism when it comes to innovation and development and invention and all of that stuff. The other part is that it gets to that tipping point where, okay, now we're in a place where the income disparity is so great that
Mhm.
it's creating, significant problems and concerns. And so, again, just thinking about some updates as it relates to that problem that
Mhm.
came out recently.
Right. I don't, people like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Steve Jobs, even Jeff Bezos, not one of my, George Jenkins here in our community who started Publix. Um, they should be rewarded for the contributions that they make. These men took these ideas and grew these things. They
Hmm.
should be rewarded. But you're right, there is a tipping point. And I'm not an economist. Um, but I know that this is a zero-sum game. We
Right,
often talk about it. It's not a zero-sum game. There are plenty, between men and women. If women are gaining, men are losing. No, that's not a zero-sum game. But the amount of money in a country is because the amount of money or the amount of wealth in a country is finite. And there's only so much. And there's something wrong with a system where a small number of individuals can control most of the wealth.
right,
That's what we talk about with men. Men are struggling today to be providers in this economy that's unbalanced. Okay, they're fighting an economy that's working against them because now the top 1% own 30% of the wealth. The top 10% own about 68%. That's 98. There's only 100%. You can't have any more. The bottom half of us own 2.5% of the wealth.
right.
That's an enormous inequity that puts the system at odds with more than half the people in the country.
Yeah,
So it's not that the certain individuals are making vast, almost obscene amounts of money. I mean, there are many people in this country who now are billionaires, which is a recent
right,
phenomenon. But while that's happening, the US is becoming a country where more and more people are living paycheck to paycheck. Today, it takes two incomes. When I was growing up, it took one income. I watched my uncles and aunts, and my uncles went to work, and my aunts took care of houses and kids. Um, Many of us can't get insurance. That's one of the things that was discussed recently with the government shutdown. The issue was we can't afford to buy insurance, even if you have insurance. I had one of our cars was damaged the other day, and I've been buying insurance for 50 years. And I talked to my agent. He said, "Well, you got to do this calculation. If you can get it fixed for this amount, get it fixed because if not, we're going to raise your rates by this much. So you have to do this calculus to
Mhm.
decide whether you're going to pay out of pocket or the insurance company, because one way or the other, you're going to be spending a lot of money. Um, but you can't buy a house. We hear that all the time, that young people who are even college educated can't just go out and buy a house and get started with that asset. They can't afford college. And we saw that people during the shutdown, we saw lines of people waiting for food. This is like the Great Depression. I mean, you have you have people waiting in line to get food because they didn't have it. And then we hear that Elon Musk was awarded a $1 trillion pay package by his board of directors.
Right.
To put that in perspective, this one individual will make more than the combined yearly salary of every elementary school teacher in the United States.
Right. Yeah.
So we talk about income inequality and because it disadvantages all of us, but
Hmm.
especially men who are trying to make a living for their families. And then we see that one individual has $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Before this was packed, before he was given this package, he had more wealth than 150 countries. I don't know what this does now, because there are countries that don't have $1 trillion economies.
Right.
So this kind of income inequality is going to work against us. And I we're going to need the same kind of courage to sort of regain some balance,
Yeah.
with book bans, income inequality, all of these problems. Who's in charge of the country and who's benefiting from the decisions that are being made?
Yeah.
Because this kind of stuff is working against, it works against many, many people. It works against students and it works against workers. And so, but we wanted to update this. We just felt that it was fair to update both things. I was very encouraged by Mark Williams. He's the commander at the U.S. He was a Navy commander who took on the book bans. And I was very encouraged to see that people are beginning to resist these sorts of things. If people can make a decision about not giving their children vaccines, to fight diseases that could kill their children, certainly they have the right to decide what books they're going to read. So,
Right. Yeah. All right.
okay.
Well, with
Well,
those
that's
updates,
my concerns.
yeah, with those updates, we'll get back to talking about the holidays because we, as we are looking over, just information that's out there and available for everyone, we came
Yeah.
across a sort of a like-minded writer who wrote an article in the New York Times last week about the holiday season, and
Right.
it was interesting to talk about writing a to don't list as opposed to a to do list, writing a to
What?
don't list.
Yeah,
And
we had no, but there was no intention of doing anything with it. Suddenly this article appears and we said, we can't resist. This is too much to resist.
right, right. So it's a great way to think about it because we often talk about to-do lists and well we should we've talked in the past podcasts about creating a budget and talking about being realistic about what you would intend to accomplish over the holidays and everything. And I do think it's in considering it this way, I do think it's important to consider a to don't list and to think
Oh,
about
that,
and maybe delineate some of those things that you're going to not do as a way
right.
to protect yourself. And again, make sure that you remain sort of mentally stable throughout the holiday season.
Yeah, I love this writer. She writes for the New York Times. She writes their well newsletter for the New York Times. And she's got a nice, breezy, humorous way of approaching these things. She starts with a conversation that she and her sisters had about planning their Thanksgiving dinner. And and at the very beginning, she said, I don't know why we talk about it. We have the same food and we have the same recipes. Everything is exactly the same every year. And not just
Mhm.
the same food, but exactly the same recipe. And
Right.
she mentioned a thing that this is their Thanksgiving, I guess, is very serious business because she said one year a relative was accused of getting cute with the Brussels sprouts. She was accused of getting cute with the Brussels sprouts because she left out the bacon. So this family takes this stuff very seriously.
Right.
So within that context, this woman says, okay, I have my to-do list, but this year I'm also going to have a to-don't list.
Yeah.
And one of the things during this conversation that she told her sisters is that she would not, this year, she was not going to deep clean the house in preparation, but that she would swipe the bathroom. And I thought, it's a nice turn. That's a nice phrase. I'm going to swipe the bathroom, which means give it a
Mhm.
once over. Deep cleaning is obviously on her to don't list. Okay.
Yeah.
And so she's encouraging us to develop, go ahead and do your to-do list, but I think it's good advice to also do a to don't list.
That's right, because we do have those things that we know we need to do and that we have to do in preparation for some of these things. So, if you were going to have people over, there are certain things that you have to do. You have to have seating, you have to have, you have to
Ice.
have the places and you know devices necessary to cook and to provide all of that stuff. So there are those necessary things. But I do think, again, the idea of having a to-don't list saying, okay, we're going to do all these things, but I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not
Right.
going to worry about this deep clean of the house to make sure because everybody's going to be okay, and so I think it's a great approach and great thing to consider as we're getting ready for the holidays and again trying to find that balance. Um,
Right.
so when she advises, when you're building your to-don't list, she advises a few things, and one of them is again great perspective to start is to clarify what's important to you.
Right.
That's often our to-do list, but also clarify what's not important to you. Um, we want to know again what things that we want to make sure that we do, but what's not important and can be left off.
Right.
It's great to keep those things in mind as well.
Right. Yeah, you have to decide, because there are a lot of shoulds at
Hmm.
the holiday time. I should do this, and I should do this, and I should do this. Nobody can do everything. Well, maybe a few people can do everything. Most of us can't do everything, particularly if you're working. So clarify what's important to you, but also what isn't important. And so this is a decision about should versus what you should do versus what you want to do. You
Right.
may not want to make name tags or placeholders for everybody. You may not want to bring out the china. It's okay to use everyday dishes. But you have to make those decisions. What do you want to do versus what you should do? And as the holidays approach, you have to start thinking about getting rid of some of the shoulds in favor of what you want to do. Because the goal here is to save time during the holidays to enjoy the people you're going to be seeing. And if you're busy doing all the work, cleaning, cooking, doing dishes, grocery shopping, gift wrapping, if you're doing all that, you may miss the opportunity to be with people you care about. So
Right.
that's the first thing she says. Clarify what's important and what isn't.
Right. And the second one is to have a discussion with the loved ones. She started out, as you said, with a conversation with her sisters, and but in that conversation, find out what some of those wants and shoulds are, and
Right,
do we really need a table full of a dozen different sides, or can
right,
we just restrict it to a couple of different things? Because those are the things that are the most popular, the things that everybody wants. Do we really need all of these different things at the dinner? And so you can go through a list of things like that and decide again what we're going to do and what we're not going to do.
right. That's right. Um, I'm sure that at every Thanksgiving dinner, there's food that's not eaten. It might be
Right.
Brussels sprouts, it might be cranberry sauce, might be deviled eggs. I don't know. And people, do we really have to go through all that? People aren't eating it anyway. Nobody
Mhm.
likes this stuff, so do we have to do it? And need do we need 13, 15 side dishes? This meal is Thanksgiving dinner is a very difficult meal to put together because you have all these dishes and they all have to be ready at the same time. And some are hot and some are cold. And so it's a difficult ballet to do Thanksgiving. So do you really need all that food? Probably not.
Yeah.
Then what's the third thing? I
The
love
calls it assembling the nopes.
nopes. Nopes. Nope, I'm not going to do it.
Right. So I really like some of these that she mentions. And like, for example, do all of the dishes that are being prepared, like pies and the sides that you were just talking about and all that, does everything need to be made from scratch?
Right.
Probably not. Right. Now, I'm sure that there are those things that every family has or that any family has where it's like, well, that recipe that, grandma made or whoever, that was the best. And so we want to make that from scratch. But do all the pies have to be made from scratch? Do all the other like routine things have to be made from scratch? Probably not. And
Okay.
so figuring out again, and I know that to some people listening, this may seem like getting into the minutia. However, if you've made a Thanksgiving dinner before, you know that these minutia aren't really minutia. These are big things because, you know, some of these sides can take hours, if not, you have to start the day before to make sure that they're ready in time. And so thinking about even something as simple as whether or not things have to be made from scratch should go on your notes list.
Right. People say, well, I need to make this pie because that's what my grandmother made. Well, she probably made that in the 40s. And the dough probably contained lard. It's hard to even find lard today. Okay.
Mhm.
And so is it worth, now, if it's worth it to you, if
Mhm.
that's worth it to you to make that pie, perfectly okay. But don't do it just out of a sense of obligation that, oh, I have to do that. I should do this because we do it every year. There are some fabulous pies out there that you can buy, pumpkin and apple, and all these pies that places are going to make that are inexpensive and everybody will enjoy them completely. So you don't have to make everything from scratch.
Right.
Second, cool it with the decorating. You don't, especially at Christmas time, you don't have to decorate every room in the house.
Well, Richard, we have a friend who has
I'm glad you're mentioning this.
who was telling us the other day that they have I think he said eight or nine, seven,
Seven.
so seven so far. Okay, I was going over seven Christmas trees. A
On the
Christmas
house.
tree in every room of the home. Now all of these aren't like full size Christmas trees and that kind of thing. However, you know, like you said a moment ago with the side dishes and things like that. If that is important to you, then perhaps it should be on the list. But if it's not, if you're just doing it because one of the other things that this author mentions is chasing the Martha Stewart holiday. Um, you know, if you're doing it because you feel like this is what you have to do, or well, it's got to all be perfect, it's all got to look just right, or well, what if somebody goes into that room? You want to have the decorations in there too. Really consider, is that necessary? Probably not. It's probably not
You know,
necessary.
when you look at magazines like Garden and Gun and Southern Living and all those photographs, come on, now those are staged. It
Right.
takes hours to put those tables together and the lighting has to be right. I won't compare it to any other kind of photos, but there's a lot of lighting, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of fussing. Nobody eats the food that you see in those pictures because it's varnished and it's shined and it's not
Right.
edible food when they're done with it, but they're doing it for the picture. Your again, if doing a Martha Stewart kind of table is important to you, remember Martha Stewart has assistants who are doing a lot of the work.
Mhm.
If that's important to you, then by all means do it. But don't enter the holiday season thinking that, okay, this year my table is going to look like that table on the cover of Southern Living. It probably won't. And you're going to spend a lot of time and energy. And remember what you're giving up in order to do that.
Especially if that doing so creates so much stress and leaves you feeling overwhelmed. Um, and the other thing that I don't know, I want to go to the other thing, but I cannot believe that you mentioned a magazine called Garden and Gun. That just hit me and made me laugh. Um,
Why?
I,
You've
I
seen
don't
it?
know. No, I've never seen that magazine before, and it's
Oh,
just fascinating to me that there's a magazine called Garden and Gun. I don't know.
yeah.
But the other thing that this author mentions is remember that it's okay if there are things that don't work out, and find a sense of humor when it comes to holiday fails. When things don't quite work out, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, she talked in this last one about, maintain a sense of humor about your holiday failures. Um, she talks about the year of Oi, O-Y, and they laugh about that because one year, I guess her husband put up letters Joy, and the J kept falling. So every time they would enter the house, they'd see, oh, it's Oi instead of joy. And so they continue to laugh about that. Laugh about your holiday fails. There will be a few,
Yeah,
but it shouldn't be how you treat other people. It shouldn't be how you treat your children. The fails should be, my table doesn't look like Southern Living. I didn't make these pies. I
right,
bought them at Publix or whatever. But I had a great time with my kids. I had a
right.
great time with my parents.
I think
Um,
that that's
put
the important thing is remember what the true purpose is. The true purpose isn't to have the perfect everything. The purpose tends to be, or typically is, or should be, spending
should be.
time and connecting and, strengthening and rebuilding some of those relationships and giving thanks for all that you have and all.
Yeah. All the things that you're doing should all be done so that you can spend time with people you care about. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's why you're so don't lose sight of that. Okay.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that,
Make
I
your
think that's
make
it
your
for today. This was, again, just trying to chip away at some of the things and provide some ideas to help people make it through these holidays that are going to be challenging for so many reasons. So that's
yeah.
it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.